My name is Emily Carter. I'm 32 years old. My father wasn't a billionaire. He wasn't famous. But to me, he was the richest man in the world. Not because of money, because of his honesty. After Mom passed away, Dad raised my older brother Daniel and me alone. He worked long hours, never complained, never broke a promise. He always told us, money comes and goes. But your family, that's your real wealth. I believed every word. Daniel didn't. As we grew older, he became obsessed with success. Every conversation became about houses, cars, investments, and inheritance. Dad often warned him, if money becomes more important than people, you'll lose both. Daniel would simply laugh, you'll understand one day. I wish he had. 3 days after Dad's funeral, Daniel called every member of the family. We're meeting at the courthouse tomorrow. The lawyer found Dad's final will. His voice sounded excited. Not heartbroken. Excited. That feeling stayed with me all night. Something wasn't right. The next morning, the courtroom filled with relatives. Aunts, uncles, cousins, even neighbors. Everyone wanted to know who would inherit Dad's estate. Daniel arrived wearing an expensive suit. Smiling, as though he'd already won, he walked over to me. Emily, I hope you're ready. For what? He leaned close enough that only I could hear him. For disappointment. You get nothing. My stomach dropped. What? He held up a document. It says everything belongs to me. The house. The company. The savings. Everything. I stared at him. No. Dad would never do that. Daniel shrugged. The papers don't lie. A few minutes later, the judge entered. Everyone stood. Dad's attorney, Mr. Harrison, walked to the front carrying 2 folders. One was thick. The other was a small black envelope. I noticed it immediately. It had my father's handwriting on it. Across the front, it read, "Open only if my children stop acting like family." Mr. Harrison quietly placed it beside the judge. Daniel didn't even notice. He was too busy smiling, and that smile wouldn't last much longer. The courtroom became silent. Mr. Harrison slowly picked up the small black envelope. He looked at the judge. Your Honor, Robert Carter left very specific instructions. The judge nodded. Read them. Mr. Harrison carefully broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter. Everyone immediately recognized my father's handwriting. His first sentence sent chills through the room. If Daniel is sitting there smiling, and then this meeting isn't about my inheritance, it's about the truth. Daniel's smile faded. The room became completely silent. Mr. Harrison continued reading. Before anyone opens my will, play the video stored inside this envelope. He reached inside. A small USB flash drive slid onto the table. Daniel stood up. This is ridiculous. The will has already been filed. Mr. Harrison calmly replied, No. Robert made this video part of his final legal instructions. The judge nodded. Play it. The lights dimmed. A large screen lit up. For a second, nothing happened. Then, my father's face appeared. I felt tears fill my eyes. It looked as if he were alive again. He smiled warmly. Hello, everyone. If you're watching this, I'm no longer with you. The entire courtroom fell silent. Then Dad looked directly into the camera. Emily, I hope you're staying strong. I covered my mouth. It felt as though he was speaking only to me. Then, his expression changed. Daniel, if you're watching this, and you've already told your sister she gets nothing, you've made exactly the mistake I feared. Daniel suddenly shifted in his chair. What is this? Dad continued. I've spent years preparing for this day. Not because I expected Emily to betray me, but because I worried greed would blind someone I love. Daniel's hands began to shake. Dad reached toward the camera. He held up a document. This is not my will. It is a copy. My real estate plan has never been stored at the courthouse. Whispers spread through the room. Dad smiled slightly. If someone presents a document giving everything to one person, that document is fake. Daniel jumped to his feet. That's impossible. The judge struck the gavel. Sit down, Mr. Carter. Slowly. Daniel sat back down. Dad continued. My attorney already knows where my real documents are. They've been protected for years. Only one person has the authority to retrieve them. Everyone looked toward Mr. Harrison. He quietly shook his head. No. Dad smiled. It isn't my lawyer. The courtroom looked confused. David, it's your turn. Suddenly, the courtroom doors opened. An elderly man in a navy suit walked inside. His face looked strangely familiar. He walked calmly to the front. Mr. Harrison smiled. "You made it." The man nodded. Daniel whispered, "Who is he?" The stranger looked directly at him. My name is David Carter. I'm Robert Carter's younger brother." I froze. My father had a brother? David nodded. "He kept me out of public life for one reason: to protect today's surprise." Daniel looked terrified. This can't be real. David calmly placed a locked metal case on the evidence table. "This case contains Robert's original estate plan. And something your father wanted Emily to hear." He slowly entered a combination. The lock clicked open. Inside was another sealed envelope and a thick folder labeled "Evidence." Daniel's face turned completely white. For the first time that day, he realized the video hadn't destroyed his plan. It had only begun to expose it. The metal case sat in the center of the courtroom. No one moved. No one even whispered. Daniel stared at it, as if he already knew whatever was inside would destroy everything. David slowly opened the thick folder marked "Evidence." He handed it to Mr. Harrison. The attorney adjusted his glasses. "Your Honor, this file contains documents Robert Carter personally collected over the last 6 years." Daniel suddenly stood. "I object." The judge looked at him. "On what grounds?" Daniel hesitated. I don't know what's in that file." The judge replied calmly. "Neither do we. Sit down." Mr. Harrison opened the first page. His expression changed immediately. He looked toward Daniel. "Mr. Carter, do you recognize this bank statement?" Daniel swallowed. "It looks familiar." "It should." Mr. Harrison placed it on the courtroom screen. It showed dozens of transfers made from my father's personal account. Every transfer had gone to Daniel over 3 years. Dad had quietly loaned him hundreds of thousands of dollars to keep his failing business alive. The courtroom murmured. Dad had never told anyone, not even me. Mr. Harrison continued. "The second document is a signed repayment agreement." Daniel looked terrified. "I was going to pay him back." Mr. Harrison nodded. "Your father believed you." Then he opened another page. "But according to these records, you never made a single payment." Daniel lowered his head. David quietly spoke. Robert didn't mind losing money. He minded losing trust. Then he handed the judge a handwritten note. It was dated 8 months before Dad died. The judge read it aloud. "Daniel asked me to sign a new will today. When I refused, he became angry and said Emily didn't deserve anything." My heart broke. Dad had written every detail. He had seen this coming. Then came the final piece of evidence, a small voice recorder. Mr. Harrison pressed play. Dad's voice filled the courtroom. "Danielle, if you're listening to this, I hope you've changed your mind." Another voice answered. "Daniels, just sign the papers. Emily doesn't need to know." The courtroom froze. Dad answered calmly, "I will never choose one child over the other." Daniel's voice became louder. "Then I'll find another way." The recording ended. No one spoke. Even Daniel couldn't look up. The judge slowly removed his glasses. "Mr. Carter, the court has now seen evidence suggesting fraud and deliberate deception." He looked toward the district attorney. "I believe this matter should be investigated." The district attorney stood. "We agree." He turned toward Daniel. "Mr. Carter, you're required to remain available while this investigation proceeds." Daniel's shoulders slumped. The confidence, the arrogance, the smile, they were all gone. Then David reached into the metal case one last time. "There is one final envelope." Across the front, Dad had written only 5 words. "For Emily, and Emily alone." David handed it to me. My hands were trembling. Inside was another handwritten letter and a single silver key. I looked at David. "What does this key open?" He smiled softly. "It unlocks something your father never told anyone about." I looked back at the key, then at the letter. Dad's first sentence made me stop breathing. "Emily, if you're reading this, I've left you something far more valuable than money." The courtroom fell silent. Every eye was on me, and Daniel whispered, "What did Dad leave you?" The courtroom was completely silent. I looked down at the silver key resting in my hand. It wasn't large, it wasn't expensive, but somehow, it felt heavier than everything else in that room. I unfolded Dad's letter. My hands were trembling. The first line made tears fill my eyes. "Emily, if you're reading this, it means you're still choosing love over anger." I paused. I could almost hear his voice. Mr. Harrison gently asked, Would you like me to read it? I nodded. He continued. Money disappears. Property can be sold. Businesses rise and fall. But character lasts forever. The courtroom remained silent. Then he read the next paragraph. The silver key opens locker 118 at First National Bank. Inside isn't another fortune. It's the future I dreamed for my children. An hour later, the judge granted permission for everyone to accompany us to the bank. The bank manager recognized Dad's name immediately. Robert Carter instructed us to release this locker only after the inheritance hearing. The silver key fit perfectly. Click. The locker slowly opened. Inside, there wasn't a stack of cash. There wasn't gold. Instead, there were 3 neatly wrapped boxes, 1 envelope, and an old family photo. The photo showed Dad, Daniel, and me standing in front of the tiny house where we grew up. On the back, Dad had written, "This was the day we had almost nothing, and yet we had everything." Daniel quietly wiped away a tear. Mr. Harrison opened the envelope. Inside was Dad's final message. "Emily, the first box belongs to you." I opened it. Inside was Mom's wedding ring, a handwritten recipe book, and dozens of childhood photographs. I smiled through my tears. These weren't expensive, but they were priceless. Mr. Harrison continued reading. "Daniel, the second box belongs to you." Daniel slowly opened it. Inside was Dad's old work belt, his first toolbox, and the watch he wore every day for 30 years. Daniel broke down crying. I thought, he didn't love me. David quietly placed a hand on his shoulder. He loved you enough to tell you the truth. Then came the third box. Dad had written, "Open this together." I looked at Daniel. For the first time in years, we stood side by side, together. We opened it. Inside was the original deed to our childhood home, not the expensive house, not the company, the little house Dad had bought when we were children. Attached was one final letter. "If you're opening this together, then you've already received my greatest inheritance. Each other." I couldn't hold back my tears. Neither could Daniel. A few weeks later, the investigation officially ended. The forged will was declared invalid. The court restored Dad's true estate plan. The inheritance was divided according to the family trust Dad had created years earlier. Daniel accepted responsibility for presenting the fraudulent document. The court considered his cooperation during the investigation and imposed penalties according to the law. He apologized publicly, not because anyone forced him to, because he finally understood. Months passed. Every Sunday, Daniel and I visited Dad's grave together. One afternoon he looked at me and said, "I spent years chasing what Dad owned, when all he ever wanted was for us to stay a family." I smiled. Dad finally got his wish. Daniel nodded. "I almost lost my sister forever." I gently squeezed his shoulder. "But you found your way back." As we walked away from the cemetery, the sunset painted the sky orange. For the first time since Dad's passing, it felt peaceful. I realized something. Dad hadn't won because he left behind money. He won because, even after he was gone, he brought his children back together. And that's when I understood. The greatest inheritance isn't a house. It isn't a business. It isn't money. The greatest inheritance is a family that chooses love over greed,